Hi guys, welcome back. As you may know, I did an intensive art course in September and October. It's my first time putting together kind of like a long, in-depth course. There were a lot of filming and editing to do. It was definitely a tough challenge for me. There were a lot of stressful moments, but I think in the end, everything's worth it when I hear the feedback from my students. Honestly, to my surprise, when I first launched this new Patreon tier and let you guys know I'm doing like a long art course, I was shocked how many people were interested in this course and how fast it sold out. In hindsight, I would have maybe opened more available spots for that or prepared more sculpting kit and painting kit for more students to join. But my mentality is I really want this class to be more like how we did art critiques in art school. I feel like in a smaller class, the professor can really give more one-on-one critiques, and that was my plan for this class. I felt a little bad that a lot of you guys wanted to join, but the spots were filled. So many of you guys reached out to me and telling me to reopen the tier again so that you can join and you don't even want the painting kit or the sculpting kits. That means a lot to me. As a holiday gift to you guys, I'm going to release the video content of my intensive art course in December and January for anyone who joined the $5 and up tier. There are 4 classes. Course 1 and Course 2 will be available to watch in December, and the rest will be available in January. Each class is about 45 minutes to a little bit over an hour long, so the videos are not super lengthy, but if you want to watch them in one go, it's gonna take 3.5 hours. Of course, it takes me way longer to make a sculpture, but when I was filming the video, I wanted to cut out a lot of repetitive, more time-consuming process and just keep the essence of the class. My goal for the classes is I want them to be fun, especially for people who are beginner and just want to dabble in sculpting and see what they can create, because I'm teaching you guys and sharing my techniques as someone who learned sculpting by myself. So I really want people to know that you shouldn't be intimidated by sculpting. And of course, most importantly, I want the classes to be informative. Also, based on the feedback from my patrons, they found my classes are very relaxing to watch. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to share my knowledge. Thank you to those of you who joined my intensive art course and those of you who are interested and still interested in watching my tutorials, because I always feel like I'm not qualified enough. Honestly, it's been a learning process for me too, in terms of filming, scheduling, also talking in my videos, explaining my process. And I want to encourage other people to pursue their passion or pick up a new hobby. It wasn't easy putting together a long course. In the meantime, working on other projects, including a big project I've been working on for almost a year. We had our group review on October 30th. I really want to do Zoom meeting because I want it to be more like a communication, and I can hear my patrons talk about their piece and sharing their inspiration and their working process and what kind of difficulties they encountered. If they had any questions, I can answer them on the spot. I took a screenshot of our Zoom meeting. Everyone's work is different from each other, and that's the beauty of art. We can use the same medium, we can practice the same art form, and everyone's piece will look different because we're all individuals, we're all unique in our own way, and we can express our individuality through our artworks. The meeting went really well. We ended up talking for over 2.5 hours, I think. And also congrats to Gretel for winning my original sculpture I made for this class. After everyone voted and I announced the winner, she got really emotional, which got me a little emotional too. Just seeing something that you made means so much to someone else. So I just want to take a moment to reflect on the past 2 months. So now for the highest tier on my Patreon, the reward is original small sculptures. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, let me know. For the rest of this video, I'm going to share some of the highlights footage from my intensive art course. I discussed a lot of topics that I haven't talked about before. If you're interested in my intensive art course, check out the link down below. Happy holidays! So in this course, I'm going to show you guys from beginning to finish of my making process when I'm sculpting a character. I hope the way I talk about things is easy to comprehend because I'm a self-taught sculptor, so I gotta admit I'm not too familiar with the more professional terms. I kind of like to explain things the way I learned sculpting, so I kind of want my character to be in the sitting pose, have her legs kind of crossed around the ankles, and also I kind of want her to look up and kind of have her shoulder up a little bit because I want her to lean back in a more relaxed pose. I don't want the shoulder part to be too wide because you have to consider how much more clay you're going to add around the shoulder. You can also use a hammer to shape it to make it more solid, if that makes sense. Sometimes I even work on the upper body and the lower body separately, so I would sculpt the upper body, including the arms and hands and stuff, and then attach the legs later instead of building a whole body wire armature from the beginning. This pointy angled clay shaper comes in very handy. So this is the tool I use most often. It has two ends. I had it for 4 years, I believe, and it's still in pretty good condition. I wrapped some polymer clay around the handle for better grip. You don't want to start rendering the details right away. When it comes to sculpting, the structure and the base shape is very important. If you're not familiar with my sculpting process, I usually sculpt in layers. I'll do a first pass, and that's when I'll focus more on the facial features, the eyes, nose, and lips. And then I'll do a second pass to work on the cheekbones, brow bones, forehead, everything else. And sometimes even a third pass, just finalizing more small details around the eyes, the lips. You want to place your sculpting tool in this 45-degree angle. Just kind of push around the edges while shaping the eyeball. Also shaping the bottom lid to make sure that it's not popping out too much because the upper eyelids are more prominent. If you want to work on the shape, you can just lightly squeeze around the eyes. You don't want to blend the clay here. We're only blending the top. I'm always trying my best to make them symmetrical, but just remember that nobody's face is perfectly symmetrical. I just want to push the lid flat a little bit, and now I'm using this angled clay shaper to smooth the outline. And right here we have the upper cartilage, and towards the tip of the nose is the lower cartilage. Use the blade side to create like a angle at the bottom right here to shape the nose. These three parts are roughly around the same length. I say roughly because again it depends on each person, and sometimes in order to give your character more personality, more expression, we can make adjustments. Our nostrils are not, you don't want to make them like just two dots like that. They're more like in an angle and points towards the tip of the nose. You can also like pull it down gently like this, rolling the tool like this to shape the bottom lip. A little tiny dip right here goes down to the cupid's bow. As you can see, we added some height to her forehead and the top of the head, and now it looks more proportional because the eyes are supposed to be in the middle. When I turn to the side, here's the brow bone. So this is one surface, and then we hit like a turning point right here. Add a little bit clay here for the transition part between the nose and the cheek. I just want her cheek underneath, right under her eyes, to be a little bit fuller. I'm actually going to pull the clay on the side back to shape the side of her face, right around the corner of the lips, down here. A little bit under, like right here. It goes in a little bit, so it's kind of like out, in, out. Turning it upside down once in a while to check if it's symmetrical. Especially the chin. The helix actually folds behind this little bumpy thing. It's definitely deeper up here and then slowly phase out, so the crease here is not as deep. I spend a good amount of time on carving and sanding. I truly believe the creative process can't be rushed. For up here, I'll fold the sandpaper and just follow this curve. The same underneath. And then for the cheek, I go this way, and also this way for this entire larger area. I didn't know that you can move this. Hi, welcome back. I'm your instructor, Tina. When I'm working on the body, I always place the head onto the armature just to see if the proportion looks correct, make it a little tapered, and turn it into more like a teardrop shape. So no matter what body shape you sculpt, the key is kind of like capture the natural form our body have. So for the upper chest, I always see this triangle shape right here. We have some muscles on each side going this direction, adding more clay in the center. As you can see, I drilled a hole on the head, like more towards the back, because she's in this looking up pose. So this is how I want to position her head, a little bit tilted to the left since her shoulders are coming up, so the collarbones are like in this upward angle. So right in the middle of the collarbones, these two little dots are more prominent because that's kind of like the end of the collarbone. The neck is definitely not in this perfect cylinder shape, and it just goes straight up. We have two muscles on each side, and they go all the way up behind the ear. We also need to put in consideration how we pose her head. It's kind of like tilting towards the left, so this muscle right here will be more extended and straighter, and the left side will be more folded and like relaxed. For me, I think when it comes to arm sculpting, like the armpit part is the trickiest part, going outwards, like in this direction. So just using my hand as example, as you can see this line right here, when I squeeze them together, it doesn't go straight up or like go in, kind of like a curve and then go up a little bit. So looking at it from the front, there's like a dip right here. When you're looking at it from the side, this line kind of like goes left. It follows the shape of the arm. When you're looking at our shoulder from the side, it goes more thinner towards the top. It's totally fine to make adjustments as we go. Checking the breasts from this angle, I think it looks pretty good. I just want to make this side a little bit fuller. Don't forget to bring it all the way to the collarbones to make this transition more smooth. We actually have a bunch of different strips of muscles. This part is coming out like a big smooth curve, and then towards the knee it goes in. Around the knee it comes out again. So I'm just trying to make the thighs look less stiff by adding more curves around the muscles. It's all about keep observing and fixing. And that's just how I learned sculpting. Even though you might make small mistakes here and there, but there's always a way to fix it and sometimes embrace it and turn it into something cool. Just remember what Bob Ross said, we don't make mistakes, they're all happy accidents. So no matter what foot you're sculpting, the inner part is always thicker and it goes thinner towards the outer part. Lightly twist each toe to make them into like a cylindrical shape. Different from our fingers, our toes are skinnier at the bottom and it's wider towards the tip. You just want to use the blade side of your sculpting tool to create this little square shape. The heel looks a little too wide, so I'm just carving some clay off. So for the padding, I'm going to section them into 3 parts. We have an oval here and another one here, also on the heel. When I'm shaping the front of the lower leg, I like to use this padding of my palm. Just lightly squeeze the sides because the front is more bony and we have more muscles and padding on the back of our calves. I always like to make 2 little indent, like angled indent on the side of the knee. For the inside, after this dip, we have a small bump, and then it goes in again, comes out around the ankle. The back of the heel actually goes skinnier, so the curve across is not as round. I'm kind of positioning my hand in this 45-degree angle instead of going like this way, so I can form this pad and the nail bed together in one pinch. Shape the palm. We have this dip right in the center. I'm going to fold the hand a little bit, also squeeze them close together. This line goes straight up here, and then it turns right here at the end of the pinky. It's not one straight line. I always like to check it from this angle, from the top. It's a good way to see if the thickness of the finger is correct. So you just want to get a tiny strip of clay, place it right in the middle, a little bit lower. So I like to use my angled clay shaper to create the fabric folds, and I use this clay shaper for more like the bigger dips. The crease is more loose towards the outer part, and towards the inner part it's more tight and skinny, and that's what I'm doing right here. I'm kind of just blending out the outer part of these creases. Sometimes I also like to use like the side of my pinky to create like a bigger fold. I would definitely recommend you to use some reference photos if you're not familiar with sculpting fabric texture. Don't forget to place it on a flat surface to make sure the bottom part is even. We don't want to have any bumpy surface underneath. The way I positioned the hands, I don't want to place them completely point to the side, kind of a little bit towards the front. The inside of the elbow part turns towards the front. This part is flatter. If we're just looking at the outline of the arm, we have a big curve here, and then it goes in, and the bicep is kind of facing the front. We have these strips of muscles on the outer part of the lower arm, so we need to add more clay right here, and towards the wrist I'll pinch it this way. For the inside, it's actually just a big curve, however it's more prominent right here, adding a little ball of clay on the side but a little bit towards the front. So I'm gonna push it over here. Usually I would just lay a sheet on top first and then just cut like a rough shape out. I want to keep the center part, like the area around her chest, rather flat. Also, I want this crease on the shirts more loose because I don't want this area to look busy. As you can see, we created a lot of really tight wrinkles on her shorts, so up here we just want to loosen them up a little bit. I always like to use the tip of my clay shaper to create this crease like this, and then push it in and drag it a little bit in the end. Unless the fabric is very stiff, you don't want to have too many rigid edges. Try to blend them out as much as you can. I want to make one sleeve a little bit longer and the other one shorter, just to break that symmetry. Coming to the side, instead of going more vertical, I'm gonna create more horizontal creases. I think I need to add more clay on the back. Don't forget to check the top view. You want it to point a little bit to the right. Also, I want to have a very subtle curve on the side, just to frame around the foot a little bit more. When I'm rolling, I kind of like spread my fingers, and then we just want to flatten it. I could have made the shoelace a little bit thinner, but I think it's kind of cute like this. You can add any sorts of like interesting decorative elements on the collar because it's right in the center. It will really catch the audience eyes when they first look at your piece. Our hair doesn't stop up there, so we need to fill this part in. Also, when you're sculpting the basic shape of the hair, you definitely need to consider the shape of the skull. Like our head is actually a little bit longer. I always like to add more volume on the back. As you can see, when I'm creating these lines, I usually start with sectioning the bigger parts, and when I'm creating the hair texture, I'll make one coming from the top and then do another one going up from the bottom. Sometimes I like to create a little cut so you can kind of separate them a little bit. I want the areas closer to her face and her body to have more condensed hair texture, and then towards the edge it will be more loose. So over here I just kept the space between the lines more close, and sometimes you can be very light with it. You want to make it more interesting, so we can do a deep one here, and next to this one I'm gonna use less pressure to make the hair more layered. If you worry that after carving and sanding you'll kind of erase some of these lines we created, you can just go over the line with this tool. For example, right here is disconnected, so you can just carve it back. Voila! And usually for a matte finish I will use a spray varnish, and for a glossy glass-like finish I use resin, and you guys probably already know this. The brand I use is Art Resin. This is the matte varnish I use on all my epoxy clay sculpture. This one's almost empty, again because I use it so often. So I'm going to mix titanium white and Titan buff as a base color, and then apply a layer of the iridescent pearl shimmer on top. I'm adding raw umber. This is the color you want to use to desaturate darker shades. For lighter colors you want to use Titan buff. If I'm painting with airbrush, I'm always doing circular motion because I don't want to stay in one place for too long. I prefer this kind of thin flat brush, and after I dip it in the paint I usually spread it out, wiggle the brush. Make sure both sides are covered with paint, scrape it, make it flat, and then apply the paint onto your sculpture. Blend out the edges. Do it quick, because like I said, the paint dries pretty fast. Go back in with the other brush, paint over the center part. And then I'm gonna dip this brush into the lighter pink and go over the edge one more time. And you don't wanna flip this brush. You wanna keep the dark pink on one side and the lighter pink at the other side. The first layer is roughly dried. I'm just gonna go over the transition near the red one more time, and don't forget underneath this little edge, gotta pay attention to the details. I wasn't sure what I was doing first, and then I kind of just want to bring back the gold flame that I did on my moon bunny. For the details on the collar, I'm going to paint a snake on the right one and a rose for the left one. I think that'll be pretty cool. Before I choose a color, first I want to make sure that it go along with her ensemble. Also, I'm not being repetitive. I don't know if you can see, I sketched out a butterfly because I feel like the shape of the wings really fits into this corner. For her lips, I'm just gonna use the same pink that I used for her blush up here, and then maybe I'll create like a gradient around the center of the lip. You want to do thin layers instead of adding way too much varnish on there because it's gonna accumulate in certain places. The goal is to make sure everything's evenly applied. Sometimes, at least for me, my first creative idea when it comes to colors usually is my comfort zone. I would encourage you guys to make something, whether it's a painting or a sculpture, do something completely different than your first thought and see how it turned out. I think the hard part is to go against your comfort zone and trying your hardest to harmonize these colors that you're not familiar with. You might surprise yourself. Usually I'll stay within the basic section. The color mixer is pretty useful. You can adjust the hue of each color. It goes without saying, each photo is different, depends on the lighting and the colors of your sculpture, but usually for temperature I will stay within 2600 to 5000, and for tint I usually put it at 20, but sometimes 25 if I want to bring out the pink hue in the photo a little bit more. I don't usually touch the contrast because, as you can see, it's making it gray. We don't want the top of the subject too close to the edge because it gives people a kind of like a cramped feeling, especially when the character is looking up. You want to leave some room on top. But now we ended up with this white border. What you can do is come up here and click content aware, and then Photoshop will automatically fill in the background space to match your photo. So I did overlay because I want to keep the brightness of the moon, and then again you can go in, just erase this layer. Be very careful around the edges. This new layer I added is way too saturated, so I'm creating a new adjustment layer, hue and saturation, bring down the saturation and create clipping mask, so it only applies to the pink sky layer. Don't be afraid of making mistakes and try to improve with every new piece, new artwork that you create in the future. Try not to compare yourself with other artists and creators. This is something I'm trying to work on myself. Focus on your own growth. Love you guys. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.